Good evening, board members. I have just a couple of things to share with you about an agreement that is on the agenda for next week for consideration, a contract with Solace. So let me tell you just a little bit about that. And to start, I'll share with you one of the phrases that we throw around in education quite a bit, and that is Maslow before Bloom. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need to make sure that kids are sheltered and safe and fed before we can really address their academic needs. And this is one of those moments where I'm going to be talking to you about mental health. And certainly the pandemic has amplified the needs for mental health supports across society, and certainly schools are not immune to that. And I think it's appropriate, since this is National School Counselors Week, to give a shout out to all of them, and for me to say that I'm certainly very fortunate to work with them in this district. And we oftentimes think of our school counselors as being mental health counselors, but it's good to set the record straight, especially for the public that's joining us tonight, that our school counselors work in three domains. In the academic domain, supporting the schooling that's going on, study skills, kids getting the right credits to move on toward graduation, all of those pieces. Next, they work in the career exploration and development realm. And for that, our students are learning the skills and establishing what they would like to be as they transition from Seneca Valley onward. And then lastly, in the social emotional learning realm. And for that, our counselors help students learn about kindness, learn about cooperation, learn about being an advocate for themselves, all of those things. And to a lesser extent, supporting our kids as they develop good mental health in life. And certainly our students have, or rather our counselors have risen to meet the need for social emotional needs and mental health in the district. But I should say that they are not certified mental health counselors. So their role is different than what you might think of if you were to go to a counseling office for specifically mental health or perhaps substance use counseling, something along those lines. In this case, they do referrals, and those referrals would go out to perhaps our in-school therapy, or also could go to out-of-school therapy providers as well. And that's where the real challenge comes in. As you can imagine right now, it's very difficult for our school counselors to be able to stay up on which providers are accepting patients, which providers have waiting lists, which providers accept which insurance. All of those things are challenges. I'm going to briefly share my screen just so you can see a visual as I'm talking through the rest of this, so you can kind of understand how Solace plays a role. So the Solace group that I'm going to share with you this evening is a mental health care coordination service. One of the challenges that our counselors have right now is being able to keep up with which providers, as I mentioned, are seeing patients who would be best suited for which particular students' needs. All of those things are real challenges for our counselors. So in order to make this a little bit easier for our counselors and to be able to get help to students at the moment of need, Solace has partnered with 4,000 schools, 3 million students. They have also partnered with those 3 million students, almost 12 million staff and families, to be able to provide support when there's a need for families. The way Solace works is the district staff would provide a referral, and Solace would then work with those outside providers to be able to find the right connection and the right counselor for the student's need. As you can see on this slide, there's quite a difficult road from the left, the person that has the need, to the person who can provide the need. Look at all of the different things that are in the way, and you start to get a sense of how challenging this is for a school counselor when they're already juggling the other things that are required of them. And they certainly do their best, but you can see there's quite a few things that make this very challenging. Solace is able to eliminate those difficulties because this is what they do. They find providers and they match them to families in need. And the nice thing about it is they're also customizing those matches. So they're finding a male counselor when a male counselor is what the families ask for. They're finding a female counselor when that's what the family is asking for. They're providing a counselor that speaks the language of the particular student that's involved. They're able to match students and families with the appropriate medical insurance, whether it's private insurance or Medicaid or a sliding scale provider, or perhaps a faith-based provider. Those are all things that Care Solace is able to do. And the whole process really is captured by this slide. And you can see there's this warm handoff, and that is our school counselor giving the name of the parent and the phone number to the care companion, and that care companion that works for Care Solace is able to connect them with the appropriate need and the appropriate provider that would meet that need. They also have a care matching system, which is an anonymous search, because we understand that families might be private about the help that they're seeking out and may not want to come to the school to ask for help about an addiction issue or to ask for help about something else that's very personal to them. So Care Solace also provides a way for us to connect families that have those needs and can call a 1-800 number if they're looking to make connections that way. With Care Solace, we would have a customized page that would be local for Seneca Valley, and families and students, and I should mention staff and their families can also contact Care Solace for support. So here's the whole process in a nutshell. The person that's looking for help, making a quick match, making follow-up calls, facilitating appointments and transition to care, and the person getting help. So what Care Solace does through telephone, through email, or texting, makes connections for the family so that they can quickly find a provider that's going to meet their need. We understand in this day and age that there's wait lists, that there's backups, that there's lags in care. Care Solace is really a great provider for us because they have a wider net. So we know the folks that are in our direct community in Zelienople and in Harmony and in Evans City and in Seven Fields and in Cranberry. But Care Solace would be able to connect students more regionally as well. So let's say that there's a telehealth provider that's in Clarion or another telehealth provider that's in Slippery Rock. Perhaps that would be a good match for the student to be able to see someone at the moment in need. And that would be a connection that they could make very, very quickly. So it certainly widens the provider base that students and families can connect to. And this is an opt-in situation. So families don't need to take advantage of this. And I should mention at this point that this is also a situation where this would not affect our in-school therapy program. So if there's a family that sees in-school therapy as being appropriate, perhaps transportation is a difficulty, perhaps they have a specific insurance need, we would continue to be able to refer them to our in-school therapy program. But one of the advantages we see is that wait lists would get shorter on our in-school therapy program because more folks would be able to find help immediately as an outside provider. And the truth is outside providers can sometimes be a better match because there's a variety of providers where in school therapy, there's one therapist in that school building, and that person may or may not be the perfect match for a particular student's need. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and ask the board if they have any questions or comments.
Are there any questions? Mr. Hester.
Dr. Roberts, thank you so much for sharing that. You know, I knew that program existed, but I didn't know to what extent of the offerings we have. I mean, it's incredible. I appreciate you sharing it with us. How have we, there's 103 people on our Zoom meeting today, but how have we marketed that or let people know that program exists? And what do they have to do to be involved or to get the help they need?
Excellent question. So this is on your agenda for approval. So this is not a partnership that we have yet. So I'm just sharing with you what it could look like for Seneca Valley. If the board approves this partnership at the board meeting next week, then we would be able to have this be live at the beginning of March. So in about 3 weeks' time, we'll be able to have all of these pieces up and running. And I see it as a great asset to our school counselors and to our whole community because it's, as I mentioned before, it is everybody in the family. So if they have an 11th grader and their college student is having difficulty, it's available to them. If they have a 6th grader and mom also needs support, this is an avenue that's available to them. And again, I mentioned it, all of our staff and all of their immediate family as well would be eligible to participate.
Thank you, Mr. Hester. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none.
Mr.
Dr.
DiTullio, I would
ahead,
also
Dr.
add that
Griffin.
for next week, when the board votes on this, we will be using federal funding, ESSER funds for this program.
Thank you for that clarification. Dr. Roberts, I'm going to guess that it's not the easiest thing to find companies like this, just because we know that finding providers has been difficult for folks. Having a resource like this available, I'm sure that there's not, millions of companies out there to choose from. So I'm glad you were able to find one. I guess my question is going to be, Care Solace, they do have what seems to be a nice network set up. Why did you choose them to bring to us?
Excellent question. So what sets them apart for my thinking is their 24/7, 365. So a family that has a need in July or a family that has a need over Christmas vacation, they're not navigating the very difficult mental health process that exists in this country. They're able to access help at the moment that they need it. I love also that there is an opportunity for our school counselors to see the referral process. So they can see that the family has been matched and they can see whether or not the student is able to get into that appointment and whether it was a good appointment or not. We never have any exposure to what the need is or what the student is perhaps talking to the therapist about. That's all private and separate from us. But we do have the opportunity, if the school counselor makes the referral, to be able to see the process and to be able to support the family as they're seeking out help. So there is really nothing like this anywhere in this part of the country. This is a California company, but their care companions are regional. So they're in Pennsylvania and neighboring states to be able to provide this service for us. And they're multilingual. So we don't have a large population of students that speak other languages as a native language, but we also have a lot of parents that do. And I think that's a great asset for us as well.
Thank you very much. Ms. Whittle.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. This is amazing. As I think we know, mental health, it's this vicious cycle. There's not a lot of providers out there. They reach for help. They maybe end up in the hospital. They come back home. They don't get the support back, and it's this vicious cycle. It keeps going around and around. Do we have, or have they, how will this be measurable from our standpoint? Like, I know it's kind of hard to put a number or quantitative measure, but will there be some kind of follow-up, a successful match? And then is there a time frame? Like if you put a referral in, did they give you, this should be within 7 days, 10 business, 5 business days?
So I think there's a couple advantages. One, because they work 24/7, they're making matches even overnight while folks are sleeping. So, you'll wake up the next morning, you'll have a text message from Care Solace that, they've made a match, and or they're going to make a text message and say, we have a follow-up question. The provider was wondering if, you're open to a female therapist or a male therapist. So there's that kind of 24/7 piece really helps in speeding that up. They say that a family would be matched within 72 hours, which is unbelievable. Now, there still could be a couple of days or a week wait in order to get in to see that therapist, but at least you have already got that appointment. You've got kind of that release to say, okay, we're moving along in this process. And, some of the situations that our families encounter are really scary. And if it's a crisis situation, the Care Solace companion can actually dial in with the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and connect right there in the moment, which I think is fantastic, that we're not leaving folks wondering what to do or how to be able to get appropriate help. I also love that it makes connections for addiction. We have students that struggle with, addiction to nicotine and vaping, a number of other things as well. And I think this provides a great space for folks to be able to get help that way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Earl. Mr. Peterson, did I see your hand go up earlier?
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Roberts, I'm having a little problem getting in focus the accessing the system. It sounds like one way is to be referred through a school employee, school counselor or teacher or whatever. Can a student or a family member make a direct access to Solace?
Excellent question. So you identified two different ways. There's a completely anonymous way, and I could be accessing that help for myself, or I could be accessing that help for my child. And that's completely separate. The school has no metrics to be able to measure how many times that has been accessed. Same thing would be true for an employee. Even if a school counselor would make the referral for an employee, as an adult, we just feel like that's a privacy issue we don't want to look at. What we would see on the school side is if the school counselor makes the referral, they would be able to see in the process whether the child's been matched or not and whether that was a good match. We would also be able to collect on an aggregate basis what kinds of referrals. So is the need based on depression? Is the need based on anxiety? So we would be able to see as a district that, and we would be able to see how many students were matched this month or next month or over the past year. So it will give us some access to be able to see, perhaps there's things that we can do on a curricular basis to support kids even better.
So if a student who hasn't reached the age of majority accesses Solace, how do the parents get looped in?
So that care companion would work with the student, kind of assess the situation and establish what would be necessary. So we would be reaching out for, or I would say we would be, but Care Solace would be reaching out for insurance information. And if the child doesn't have insurance, they could reach it back out to the school and we can make a connection for Medicaid or whatever would be necessary, value behavioral, et cetera.
Okay, maybe I didn't ask my question correctly. I'm trying to understand how if a student, a younger student, accesses the system directly, Solace, how does Solace ensure that the student's parents or guardian gets wrapped into the loop?
Gotcha. And that would just be if they're accessing it anonymously, then they would be filling out a questionnaire about who they are and a phone number and things like that. So Care Solace would be calling them to make that connection, saying we want to include mom or dad or guardian with this connection. So it's not going to proceed without involvement of the family.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Looking around, seeing none. Thank you very much, Dr. Roberts.